Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, February 21st, 2025, and today we're going to talk about clearing snow from tunnels, will higher food prices help local organic food sellers, and it's Feedback Friday, which is always a party, so let's do it. All right, well, welcome into Friday, everyone. I'm reporting from yet another single-digit morning here in Kentucky. It is quite cold. Last night, Hannah and I headed up to Louisville to have dinner at a restaurant where a dear friend of mine, Andy, is the chef. The name of the restaurant is Barvetti, and the food is just unreal. If you're ever in Louisville and in need of a really nice meal, that place is amazing. But I used to cook with Andy like many years ago. Like we literally ran the Garde Manger station together at a restaurant called Le Relais there. And just to see how good he has gotten is amazing, and I feel very proud of him. Getting older sometimes gets weird and complicated, but being able to watch people go on to do awesome things over 20 or more years is a definite perk. Get the potatoes with the whipped telaggio. It's never had anything like that. It's amazing. Okay, so it's Friday, meaning Feedback Friday, where we look back on what you all were saying about the week's topics. On Monday, we discussed hugelkultur and starting tomato seeds from scratch, and I like this recommendation from @WROH. I'm not sure how you'd pronounce that, who writes, quote, "A suggestion for a germination chamber. I only grow during the main spring, summer, fall months and not at all in the winter. And because of that, my walk-in cooler, CoolBot, is not used. I put a small heater and lights in there and it stays warm with little heat input. Once things germinate, I move them to an outside double-walled greenhouse with heat cables. Has worked well for 17 years, end quote. Yeah, I don't use mine in the winter because I store potatoes and such in there with a thermostat and a small heater to keep it above freezing. But I love this idea. And in fact, on really hot nights in the summer, I will kind of do a version of this where I'll put our lettuce and later spinach trays in there to cool overnight and then pull them out the next evening to germinate in our shed in the shade. So basically, I kind of use it to replicate the spring or the winter to germinate crops that don't love the summer. So yeah, works as a germination chamber on those cold weather crops too. Lots of good comments on folks' experience with hugelkultur in that thread too that are worth reading through because they are nuanced and lots of people have lots of experience with it in different climates. Probably too much to go into here, but maybe another time. On Tuesday, we talked about efficient lettuce mix production, and I liked this edition from @StephenHatcher7700, who wrote, quote, "Packing lettuce mix efficiently, jam bags to what looks to be about full. Don't use the scale yet. Grab handfuls of lettuce and just stuff them in. Do multiple bags, one after the other, in groups of 5 or 6 or 10. Whatever your flow is comfortable with. Do 12 or 6 and 6 if you're packing cases for stores, then put them on the scale to add or remove a pinch or two of leaves to get to the weight. This is faster than filling each bag while on the scale and constantly rechecking the scale with each handful you add. Your target weight, whatever yours is, 4 ounces, 5 ounces, 6 ounces, whatever, is a rough target. Set an acceptable range, plus or minus 4.5% is the official tolerance standard here in Canada for packaged food weighing between 3.5 ounces to 7 ounces. I'm not sure about the US food packaging guidelines. I do 6 ounce, 170 gram bags. The 4.5% tolerance range is then 162 grams or 178 grams. I aim for 165 to 180. If you land a bit under or a bit over your target, but within range, you're done. Move on to the next bag. Don't waste time adding or removing one more small leaf to get exact weights. Do try to land overweight a bit more often than underweight to be on the safe and fair side. Note, technically, the weight of the bag or clamshells plus labels and closures are not included in net weight. Another reason to lean towards overweight. End quote. So I will put the lettuce standard guidelines in the comment section because I do think that's interesting, but I think this is a fair approach, especially if leaning towards slightly overweight. No one complains about bonus lettuce that I know of. Well, generally not. In cooking, we always are taught to focus on one part of the process at a time. Like if you were dicing 15 onions, you don't just dice every onion as you go. You cut all the tops and bottoms. You peel all the onions at the same time. You split all the onions in half at the same time, and so on, like just doing one part of the process at a time. I find that same approach works really well in farming in many areas, like don't make a single tray and then seed a single tray, make all the trays at once, and then move on to the seeding part, etc. Way more efficient that way. On Wednesday, I talked about pets in the garden, and at GN Norsworthy asked, quote, "Does your cat ever take squirrels? I lost a whole crop of Seminole pumpkins and half my grapes to squirrels last year," end quote. So no, she doesn't take squirrels and she doesn't take rats either, but she does go after baby rabbits sometimes, which is both good to see and sad to watch because they're so cute. Also, chipmunks. She used to get a lot of chipmunks, but she is also a bit of an old lady now. And I think that she prefers the mice and voles under the tarps, and will come running when she hears me moving the tarps. Now, squirrels are a much taller order. We don't, at least as of yet, have squirrel issues. That's generally more of an urban pest, so I don't have a ton of experience with them, but I know that they can be devastating and smart. Like cats, there is not a lot that can be done to keep squirrels out of gardens unless you give them something else to care about more and make sure to encourage their predators like hawks and owls. Some sort of terrier might be a good option too. So, yeah, maybe at least better than a cat. And on Thursday, we talked about the hedge wedges and liked this from @AlexPowell9, who asks, quote, "Anyone have thoughts on spacing of vining squash in 4-foot beds? I always have planted them 6 feet apart on the row with 4-foot spacing between rows, but I was thinking of only planting squash in every other bed, in which case maybe I could double up the density in the row. End quote. Great question. So when we were doing row cropping back in the day, we would do 4 feet apart in the row and rows 8 feet apart. Now, in our more bio-intensive setup, what we've been doing is we plant 2 rows on a 48-inch bed, that's 4 feet or 122 centimeters, with the plants 3 feet apart in the row, and the rows roughly 3 feet apart from each other in the bed. That is about as close as you can plant them, and it can slightly reduce the size of the squash, which in our case is actually a good thing because our customers generally are not looking for a butternut squash the size of a small dog. Some chefs and others like that. So if that were the case, we would back off our spacing a little bit just to get bigger squash. Also, if you do go that tight, like that 3 feet apart spacing, you either have to irrigate or have really good soil and moisture. Plus, we always add a nice handful of nutritional compost at the base of every plant. Watch the video I did on winter squash for more on that. We'll link that in the show notes. Thanks as always for the questions and comments. I appreciate you all dearly. Best comment section on YouTube as always. All right, up next, we'll knock off the snow. Yeah, BRB.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to be in the field growing food for my community, not creating elaborate pack lists, not writing newsletters or responding to emails, not designing and maintaining web stores, and etc. And I especially don't enjoy doing those things after an already full and fulfilling day of growing food. Actually, if I spent less time on my phone and behind the computer, that would be great. If only there were a solution for that. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for farmers. With one single platform, Farmhand enables you to offload your administrative tasks, send and manage communications, and sell more to your customers. Farmhand saves growers an average of 6 hours of administrative load each week. That's 6 hours so you can get back into the field, spend more time with friends or family, or have a life outside of the farm, which is actually a thing. Think about it. What would you do with an extra 6 hours a week? Sign up for a free trial with the link in the show notes because now is the best time to dial in those systems for the next growing season. Follow the Farmhand link in the show notes to learn more. All right, back to the show.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Chris Smith, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, I just came in from knocking snow off of my cat tunnels and I was wondering if there was a way to do it while working smarter, not harder," end quote. Okay, so this one was also on my mind this week as we were getting our own snowfall. I know we are technically headed out of the winter, but For us, and for many of you, some of the heaviest snowfalls we get are in March and even April because snow really loves that range when the air is slightly warmer but still below freezing. Basically, to dramatically oversimplify the science here, warmer air can hold more water vapor, specifically 4% more for every degree Fahrenheit, leading to larger, heavier snowflakes. This is why when it's super cold and snowing, like it was this week here, the snow is often thinner and sharper and does not accumulate as much. There's less water vapor to make the snowflakes out of, among other variables. So in the early spring, or in the warmer winters we are seeing across the globe, when it's not super cold and there's a lot of moisture in the air, the recipe for big, heavy snowfalls is ready to rock. And if you allow those heavy snowfalls to accumulate too long on a tunnel, it can potentially collapse them, especially a cat tunnel. Using a handy dandy and handy random snowfall calculator that I found on the internet, if you had a 100-foot tunnel that is 20 foot wide and got half a foot of snow, that's 3,000 to 4,000 pounds of snow on that tunnel, which isn't great. Now, depending on the tunnel design and type, they are built to handle a lot of weight. They can also be built to not handle any weight at all in the case of something like, like a PVC or cheap metal structure. So whether you need to bother being out there clearing snow will depend a lot on that particular structure you have and the forecast. The Gothic style tunnels are, for instance, really good for shedding excessive snow more easily than the quinset, the arched styles. Not that those can't be strong, just that they don't naturally shed as easily. Anyway, I've not even gotten to your question yet, which seems like a good idea to do eventually. So there is no one right way to do this, as it will depend a bit on your structure and tools. If I'm by myself, I like a soft, long-handled broom, as I don't want to poke a hole in my plastic. They also make long-handled tunnel clearing tools that you can specifically purchase, or you can just buy a long handle or make one and put a push broom on top of that, whatever works for you. Then I start by pulling what snow I can reach all the way around the tunnel. Then I go into the tunnel and start pushing it from the inside to knock it down the peak a little bit. It will typically slide all the way off if it's heavy enough. The quinset tunnels can be a little harder for that because it just kind of wants to bounce up and down and not actually slide off the side. So the Gothic tunnels come in handy in a snowier region. If you have a second person, have them stand on the other side and do the same thing in sync with you so that you're both going down the tunnel at the same time. One person had written on a previous episode that doing one side fully and then doing the other side could lead to a collapse, like the weight of one side smashes the tunnel towards the other way. So it's better to do both sides at a time, like just do one side and then go around and do the other side and then come back around and do the other side. Not super efficient, but could be. If you have a lot of snow in your tunnel, that may make more sense safety-wise. And I see nothing wrong with that recommendation. It may take more time, but obviously that's a small price to pay to prevent a total collapse of your tunnel. However, I would obviously also not suggest waiting until there is so much snow on your tunnel that it could be a concern. We don't wait until the snowfall is done snowfalling to start clearing our tunnels. Personally, I just don't want to risk it. Even if it's the middle of the night, I will go out and clear our tunnels if need be. Another option that I've heard of, but not personally tried, requires a second person to basically you're tying a bunch of knots in a rope and throwing that rope over top of the tunnel. And then you walk down the tunnel, both of you pulling the rope back and forth to loosen the snow and kind of not have it fall off. Something like that could work, some variation thereof, depending on the snow that you're dealing with and the amount and the weight and the type of structure. But the type matters a lot. Like we had that ice storm not that long ago, and there was just not a lot that could be done that didn't risk the tunnel plastic to break off the ice. So anyway, just make sure that whatever you are using is soft and try not to let the tunnel get so heavy that the risk even exists that it could crush. But check with your manufacturer about snow load as well. You may not have to clear it at all, depending on which one you need more, the sunlight on the crops or the insulation from the snow to keep stuff from freezing, because snow does make a really great insulator. So sometimes in cold snaps, it's nice to leave a light layer of snow on to keep the goodies inside the tunnel happy. All right, so let's take a quick break, and when we come back, local food in this economy? Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by GrowSmart. Curious if your soil will be ready for planting this spring? GrowSmart can help you find out with their at-home soil tests. They'll ship it right to your door, Just send it back with your prepaid shipping and you'll have your lab results in just 2 business days. Their reports are simple with tailored seasonal recommendations for fertilizers and amendments. Order now at growsmart.com and use the code DAILY for 10% off. That's DAILY. Begin your soil prep now for a great spring with GrowSmart. All right, back to the show. So I have sort of talked about this before, that is, will tariffs help small farmers? But I think it's worth revisiting now with some tariffs in place and others looming, plus the immigration crackdown, among other variables in the food system. Oh, and the government contracts are still not being paid to farmers. Lots of variables right now. Basically, I continue to get folks asking if I thought that between things like tariffs and bird flu and immigration crackdowns, will some or all of that bring the price of conventional food up and make local and or organic produce more financially appealing by contrast, i.e. if the prices are roughly the same, will more people lean towards organic instead? So to be clear, I have no idea. And in fact, no one really does or could. There is very little precedent for this much change happening this quickly. The layers of complication here are a lot to account for, even for the best economist. And I, to be perfectly transparent, still use my fingers to count most of the time. So factor that into my thoughts as I continue to talk here. This is just my best stab at what's going to happen. All right, so let's just operate under the assumption that prices of conventional food will continue to rise because without the cheap labor, it will cost more to grow it, there will be less of it, or whatever. Pick your rationale. No one really disputes, including Trump, that prices of goods will, at least temporarily, go up due to tariffs. Now, food will be included in that, if only for the labor force change, though some of it will be dependent on what is decided with the tariffs on Mexico and Canada in March and how extensive the immigration crackdowns are in and around large-scale farming communities, etc. However, in the scenario where conventional food prices continue to rise, that doesn't mean organic small-scale local food won't also cost more to produce, and it also doesn't inherently mean that there will be enough organic food produced with legally documented labor in the U.S., which isn't always the case in large-scale organic farming, to cover any deficits created. Also, tariffs may cause expenses to rise for organic farmers as well. Maybe it's imported rice hulls or peat or coconut coir in their soil mix, or it's steel for their high tunnels, tools, tractors, etc., or it's row cover or seeds or seed trays produced in China or somewhere else. Countless things come from other countries that are now under tariffs or may soon be. And some of those things will affect local organic farms as much as they affect large-scale conventional farms. Obviously, the overarching goal with tariffs is 1, to renegotiate trade deals, and 2, to encourage manufacturers to move their facilities back to the U.S., which is fine in the long term. At least theoretically, it's fine. But in the short term, probably not great for prices. There are not necessarily American suppliers for everything, and those that exist are often more expensive, which will add to the cost to the farmer and then ultimately to the consumer. Moreover, it's not easy to just up and build new facilities to supply all of the things that we get from other countries at the moment with any amount of haste, especially with the cost of building supplies being higher from the tariffs and labor being more expensive from the crackdown. And that's if there is even a will to do so. It's easy to forget that behind every small company is just a group of folks trying to keep it together, and they have to want to do so. So there's that. Bird flu is going to dramatically impact egg prices for the foreseeable future, though this is perhaps one area where pastured small-scale production might have a slight edge, at least in the short term. A lot of that depends, however, on how hatcheries are able to keep up and survive the outbreak, as well as how grain prices change positively or negatively. Then there's also a vaccine available for the birds, which, if permitted, could stop the need to kill millions of birds right now and slowly return the prices of conventional eggs to something affordable. Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins is expected to announce the details of the bird flu strategy in coming days. Perhaps for that reason, bird flu and pastured poultry should be saved for its own segment because it is also a dynamic and rapidly evolving topic. But that is one area where local food could potentially have the advantage, so to speak, at least for the short term. Immigration crackdowns will likely affect basically everything from meat processing to picking oranges until the H-2A program is reformed and implemented, which could take some time. Food might go to waste in the field in that time. Stuff may not get planted, etc., leading to higher prices. Though not everyone would agree on how. I think most people would agree that immigration and trade in particular are areas that have needed reform for a long time. Most of those people would also probably agree that the food system is, to be kind, broken and pretty fragile. I think COVID was a good reminder of that. But the pace at which this is all happening could be a big deal in terms of grocery store prices. And remember that the problem for those farmers finding labor isn't that they just do not pay enough. I know tons of small scale growers who pay really well and still struggle to find labor. So I would not expect that problem to be fixed very quickly, and definitely not just by better wages that will notably fall on consumers to pay and the cost of the item. So I guess if I'm being optimistic, I think all of these actions could result in conventional produce and grains becoming more a reflection of their actual costs when operating with legal labor, which would mean that organic produce may not look as expensive by comparison. But I also don't think that organic local food will get to just stay the same price either. Everything will likely shift upwards in the price. So even in that optimistic view, millions of more people could become food insecure, because most food, even as it is right now, is too expensive for large swaths of the country to afford, let alone organic food. Whatever your grocery bill is now, however high, I fear could be as low as it gets for quite a while. So for me, this idea that maybe the prices will balance out is vaguely possible, but not super realistic, at least not in the immediate. A year or two from now is perhaps a different story, but also a long way away. For me, I grew up with a single mom, and I remember the look on her face with the bills spread across the kitchen table, trying to figure out which ones she could ignore in order to buy us groceries. So call me a little biased, but I would definitely prefer the changes come more pragmatically and not put a bunch of families in that situation for any amount of time. But feel free to disagree. We'll catch up about it next week. Otherwise, I'm going to end it there. Don't forget to join the Growers Daily Major League Soccer Fantasy League. I'm celebrating with my FC Cincinnati gear today. The return of the MLS season. Very fun stuff. First games are Saturday, tomorrow afternoon. So get on it. Link to that in the show notes. Before we go, I want to give one last shout out to the good folks over at Rimmel Greenhouses for making this possible. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Big thanks to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of February, you get a shout out in the show. So big shout outs today to no new members yesterday. So no story today. All good. Everyone have a great weekend. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you on Monday, hopefully with a story. Yeah. Bye.